Hi everyone, today we're going to be doing this logo animation thing. It's going to be a kind of long one. We're going to be going through three techniques. One for the folding box, second for the 3D logo, and then third for the text animation. Let's get to it. Let's go to Effects tab. Under Effects, pick Fusion Comp, drag that to the viewer, click on the Fusion Comp, press Ctrl D on the keyboard, change the length to 10 seconds by typing 10:00, then add, then change. Click on the Fusion Comp and open the Fusion page. Let's bring in a rectangle mask node. And for this rectangle mask, let's drag that to the left viewer. Let's close the Effects tab to create some space. Now under Inspector for the rectangle mask, increase the height to 1. But what I want is a situation where this thing is actually square. So what I'm going to do is go to the width. Within the space here, delete all of this and type. Now this particular comp and my project is HD. So I'm going to put 1080 divided by 1920 and I press enter. So you see that this is now square. Now we drag this up a little bit. Let's bring an image plane by clicking on this here. Let's drag that to the right viewer so we have a square plane. Let's go to Media Pool. I'm going to bring in a footage. This floating headphones footage. If I drag that to the left viewer, see we have this thing just floating around like so. Go in here and pull this forward a little bit. I want to use this rectangle mask to mask this. So I'm just going to bring in a mask control node, connect this rectangle mask to the garbage matte input. You can hold down Alt on the keyboard and drop this on here, then click on garbage matte. Usually it's just the dark gray one. I'm now going to connect the media in one to the yellow input of the matte control node. If I drag that to the right viewer, we see it is masking the wrong part. So I'm going to click on matte control node under inspector, expand garbage matte, click on invert. And then we have that. Let me close the media pool so we have some space. So we have the first part of the box. We need this left and right part. So we're going to do something interesting. Instead of recreating a rectangle mask, we're going to reuse this rectangle mask. So we're going to bring in two transform nodes. Like that. Let me make a bit of space here. Then I'm going to connect this rectangle mask to the yellow input of the transform. Note that if you drag and drop like this, it will automatically connect to the mask input because this is a mask node. But that is not what we want. So I'm just going to click and drop it on the yellow input. Now I'm going to drag this rectangle mask here. Then I want to drag this transform, this first transform here. Let's drag it to the right viewer. I want this first transform to mask only this left side. And you know the width of this is 0.5625. So I simply go to this transform node, go to center and put plus 0.562. No, sorry, minus because I'm moving it backwards. So it's going to be minus 0.5625. And you see it covers just that part. Now for this other one, let's drag that to the right viewer. I want it to move forward. So I'm just going to say plus 0.5625. And now you see we have this, the next one, the one on the left, and this one, the one on the right. We need to now use this mask that we have here. Let's drag this back a little bit. Let's pull this transform nodes back a bit, like so. Let me just pull this media in one out, like so. Then I'm going to bring in a matte control node, a piece for each of the transform nodes. Connect this transform. Notice it's for the mask, right? So I'm going to connect it to the garbage matte input. Connect this to the garbage matte input of the matte control node. For each matte control node, I go under inspector, expand garbage matte, and click invert. Go to this matte control node, expand garbage matte, and click invert. Now I'll need to connect this media in now to the yellow input of the smart control node, and connect this media in here to the yellow input of the smart control node. So I'm going to connect each of these smart control nodes to an image plane. So I'll go to here, click on this, click on image plane, click on this, click on image plane, click on this, click on image plane. Let's just move this whole thing back a little bit. So now we have this image plane here. I have this image plane here for the center. This is for the left, and this is for the right. You see, if we bring in the merge 3D here and connect all three image planes and drag this to the viewer, we have the full image. Let's just disconnect that for now. Just wanted to show you that. Let's pull media out forward. Let me zoom out a little bit so we can see like so. Add another 2 image planes here. So let's bring another image plane here. Let me pull this whole thing up a little bit because I need to add another image plane here. We connect this to this image plane, connect the same rectangle mask to this image plane. You'll note that these are now just the same. Okay, so now this here forms the center of the animation I showed you. So what I'll do is go here and press Shift Spacebar, type duplicate. So I'm going to pick duplicate 3D and add. I'm going to drag that to the right viewer. Now for the duplicate 3D, we're going to make it 4 copies. And for the Y offset, I'm going to type 0.5625. So you see it just extends upwards like so. And I'm going to go to pivot. I'm going to move pivot down by half of 0.5625. So I'm just going to go here and say minus 0.5625 divided by 2. That's for the Y pivot. And I'll just go to rotation. I want it to rotate around the X axis. So if I rotate it, you'll see it folding. If I shift, you see it folding. If I rotate it down to 90 degrees, it folds perfectly into a box. So we have the setup for this duplicate 3D. I can double click on this to reset that. But I now want the image of the video to be on this first box. So I'm going to bring a merge 3D. Remember that the image of the center box is this one, this image plane here. So I'm going to connect this image plane to this merge 3D and connect this duplicate to this merge 3D. If I drag this to the right viewer, you see that shows. But if I go here and I zoom in a bit, see, it kind of shows perfectly. Interesting. So let me just show the back. So I don't want it to show at the back. So I'm going to do a little gymnastics. I'm going to go to this particular image plane with the image. I'm going to go to transform and go to put 2 zeros, put 3 zeros, then put 1. So that way, if I move to the back, it doesn't show at the back. It's showing on the front. So we have that set up. Now we need to create for the left and right flaps. So this one will be for the left. Let's bring in a merge node for that one too. And then for this one, we just connect this image plane to this merge and connect this one from the left to this. And let's drag that to the viewer. You see it is, let's move it. You see it is not sitting exactly at where we want it to sit. We want it to sit at this corner here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this image plane, this one. I'm going to move it down here by 0.5625. So I'm going to go to image plane, go to transform, and for the X value, I'm just going to increase it by 0.5625. So you see it sits on the image plane, but then it's kind of interfering with the image plane itself. So I'm just going to go here for the Z value, type 3 zeros and press 1. So it sits perfectly on that side. We're going to do the same thing for image plane 3. That's for the right flap. I'm going to bring a merge 3D. I'm going to connect this to this merge 3D. I'm going to connect this to this merge 3D. And let's drag that to the right viewer. You see it's on this edge here, but I need to move it down here. So it sits on this edge here. So I'm going to go to this image plane and go to transform, and because I'm moving it back, so I'm going to type minus 0.5625 and then go to the Z value 0.0001. So it sits perfectly there. Now I'm going to go here, drag this back a bit, and I'm going to go and put a transform 3D in front of this. Shift spacebar, transform 3D. Add that. Click here, shift spacebar, transform 3D. Add that. Bring in another merge node and connect all these to that merge node. So we see where each sits. I drag that to the right viewer. You see they all sit on top of each other, which is not what I want. So for this first one that's on the left, I'll move it to the left by 0.5625. So that's to the left, that's to minus. So I'm going to go here and say minus 0.5625. So it sits perfectly there. Then for this right one, I'm going to say 0.5625. So right here we have the flaps. Now I've moved it. Now if I want to rotate these flaps now, let's say I go to this left flap and I rotate it. You see it's rotating about the center there. I need to move the pivot point to this side. So I'm going to double click on this to reset it. Go to pivot. I'm going to the X pivot. I'm going to increase it by half of 0.5625, which is be 0.5625 divided by 2, and press enter. And you see that the pivot point has moved here. And if I rotate it, it now rotates about the right axis. Double click to reset it. Now for this other one on this side, we need to move the pivot point back by half of 0.5625. Because I'm moving it back, it's going to be minus, right? So I'm going to click on this transform, expand pivot, go to the X value, go here and type minus 0.5625 divided by 2. So this way we don't have to remember figures, we just do the calculation right within that box itself. So now if we go here, you notice if we increase the value by 90, it folds the wrong way. We want it to fold forward, so it's going to be minus 90. Okay, now we set up the animation. For duplicate 3D, I want the animation to start from frame 0. So we go to X here, keyframe it. We're going to go to frame 100 and set the value here to 90. So you see it folded already. Let me zoom out a bit. So we have that folded. Like so. Then for the left arm, I want it to at frame 110. I want it to stop at frame 110. I want it to be already folded. That's on the y-axis. I'm going to type 90. So you see it's folded. I keyframe this. Then for this transform to, I want it to be folded by frame 90, but this one will be negative 90. So negative 90, keyframe that. Then we go back to frame 0. Let's go back to frame 0 by pressing this and just type in 0 for the value for this right one, and click on this one, 0 for this one too. So if we go back here and play, you see we have all of them folding like so. Great. Let's select all of them, hold down Control, click on duplicate, click on 3D1 and 3D2, and let's go to spline editor, tick all of them, click on zoom to fit, click on this icon here to select all the keyframes, right click on it, go to ease, click on out cubic, or better still, let's press F first, then let's press T. Then for the easing, when you press T, it gives this additional menu. Let's just drag the ease in up a bit, like so, almost up to 80. And close this plan editor. Play this back. You see it just fold like so, which is cool. Now we are done with the folding box. The next thing for the box now, I don't want it to be white in color. I want to have a different color. So I'm just going to go to this image plane. So what I also realized is I didn't have to add these separate image planes here. I could use this same image plane. So I can just connect this to that and connect this to that. And we have the same box still there. I can delete these two image planes. So we don't have to reuse the same image plane. It's just more efficient. Beauty of Fusion. So I click on this image plane here. I can go to Materials tab and click on this color. Let's just pick this color. And yeah, if I click on light and shading, we see we have this color there. And we are done with the folding box. The next thing we do is for the logo itself. Now you can download this logo from, if you Google it, just download it and drag that to the node grid. Let's drag it to the left viewer. We see this logo thing here. Note here, if I scroll up a bit, it's 1024 by 1024. Not exactly the size of our project frame settings, but that does not matter. I will show you what we'll do now. Let's close media pool. So for this, I'm just going to click on an empty part of the node grid, press Shift Spacebar, bring in an S rectangular node. Now you will see an outline of that S rectangular node. So I'm just going to click on this edge. It highlights. I drag it till it fits to the edge of this. So that fits perfectly. You see it's 0.812. You can just copy this, copy, and paste it into height too, because it's a square. Then for the edges, for it to be curved like the edge here, I'm just going to go to corner radius, type 0.45. And then you see it fits perfectly on that. So what I'll do, move this up a little bit, press while still selected, press Shift Spacebar, type extrude 3D. Let's drag that to the left viewer so we have a big white box of it. Let's click light and shading so we get to see how that looks. Then for the extrude, for extrude depth, type 0.1. For bevel depth, 0.01. For bevel width, 0.01. Then I'll go here and bring in a merge 3D. I'll bring in an image plane here because I want to put this here on top of this, on the front and the back of it. So I'm going to connect this media in to this image plane to connect to the green input here. If I drag that to the left, you obviously have that here. If I connect this now to this image plane and connect this extrude to this merge 3D, let's drag that to the right viewer. If I hold down Shift and rotate around it, you see it's neither showing on the back or the front. It's because this image plane, if I move it back like this, if I hold down Shift and I rotate, you see it's just here. So I need to move it back a little bit. So I go to the image plane, I go to transform, and I move it back a little bit. So you see it's showing. If I hold down Shift, you see it's showing, barely showing. So it means I just need to increase it just a little bit more. So I add just one here, and then we have it showing. You see it's kind of dark. So I go to this image plane. I go to, on the tab, I go to Material. I make sure I click two-sided. So the back also lights up. One other thing we need to have done on this image plane here, so click on this image plane, go to Material, make sure it's also two-sided. Let me see, this other one, you don't need to do that. Just this image plane and this other one here. So back to what we were doing here. So now we have this image on the front, we need another one at the back. So because we can reuse the same node for the back and front, all I just need to bring in is another transform 3D. So I'm just going to click on an empty part of the node grid, Shift Spacebar, transform 3D, add. Note that wherever you click is where the node will get put when you press Shift Spacebar. So I'm going to connect this image plane here to this transform 3D. I'm going to connect this transform 3D to this merge 3D. And then if I now go to Shift, I'll now go to this transform, just increase the value till it's showing. So 121 is just on the surface. I'm just going to add a 1 at the end of that. So it's 0.1211, kind of fits perfectly. So now if we go to this merge 3D, if we rotate like so, we have it on the back and the front. Now for this extrude, so that it doesn't look so bland, I'm just going to click on the extrude, shift space bar, bring in a replace material 3D node, and you know the shade I'm going to use. Click on effects, on the templates, expand fusion, click on shaders. I'm going to bring in the trusty chrome shader. Thanks Blackmagic. Connect that to replace material 3D, just makes it look a little jazzier, that's all. And now we have that logo done. Let's just arrange this a little bit. So what I want to also do here is I want to make this look a little better. So I'm going to click on this, select all of this, right click on it and group it. So it becomes a clean node setup. Okay. Just going to move this here like so. And I want to connect it to this output here. I'm going to bring in a merge 3D. Connect this to this merge 3D. Arrange that properly. And just move this up a little bit. I'm going to put a transform 3D between this. I'm just going to put shift space bar, transform 3D, add. Now this transform 3D is going to be used to rotate this. Then I'm going to use another transform 3D to be positioning this logo. So I'm going to bring another transform 3D. And so we have that set up. I'm going to connect this here to that. Let's drag that to the right viewer. So we have the box and the logo. Before I connect this logo in here, I want to do a little thing. Let's close this effects tab. Let's bring in a renderer 3D. Before that renderer 3D, let's bring in a merge 3D. Now this merge will be for lights. Let's bring that here. You move this forward a bit. It's going to be for lights. Then between here, I want to bring in a transform 3D. Now this one is just to resize the image so that it fits properly on the screen. I'm going to connect this merge 3D to the renderer 3D. You see what I mean? And drag this renderer 3D to the side. Now the reason why, let me show you something. If I go to the beginning, you see this image doesn't fit perfectly on the screen. It's supposed to fill up the screen. So if I go to this transform 3D and go to the Z value, I'm going to type this magic figure of 1.321. So through practice, I found that this figure fits the image perfectly into the frame. Press enter. So you see the image fits perfectly on the screen. No edge and all that stuff. Cool. Now, if we go through the animation, you see the animation, it just folds. So it just folds. We don't get to see what is really going on. So what I need to do now is I want a situation where from that frame 0, I want this whole box thing here. I want it to move back from the screen and fold and come to the left side here. So what I'll do is, that means between, let me zoom out a little bit. I'm going to have to create, maybe not too much. I'm going to move all of this forward a bit to create space. I'm going to put a transform 3D node here because this here is just the whole box. So I want the transform to move this whole thing back. So I'm going to click on here, shift space bar, bring in a transform 3D. And for this transform 3D from frame 0, I want the Z value to be 0. Then if we get to frame 140, I want it to be -4. So that's it. Then when it's zooming out, I also want it to be rotating. And if I decide to rotate this, it's rotating around the wrong axis. Yeah. So I'm going to double click on Y to reset it. I'm going to go to pivot. Under pivot, you go to the Z value here and we increase it by half of 0.5625. So 0.5625 divided by 2. And now if you rotate it, you see it's rotating around the right axis. So for here, I want this rotation to just continue. So I'm just going to go to this and in here, double click and type equal to time. It should be small case time. Press enter. So if we go here and we play this back, we see this moves back. And before we go there, let's go to renderer 3D. I'm going to change this renderer type to hardware renderer, so it plays back faster. So it just keeps rotating like so. So then what I also need to do is, I think I want the transform to be a little faster. So I'm just going to go to this Y rotation. I've multiplied by 2. Okay, so I don't want this also to be so straight. I want it to be bent a little bit. So I'm going to go to this transform. I want to go to frame 0, go to the Z value, keyframe that Z value, go to frame 140, like so, and change that to 60. So if you play this back, you see it just does that thing where it rotates like so. Then I want a situation where as it's doing this movement, it moves to this left. So I think I need to increase the length of this fusion comp. Let's just make it 15 seconds. Let's go back to the timeline. Let's click on this Control D and make it 15 seconds. I click on back to the fusion page so you have more frames to play with. Let's drag this to the viewer. I want it such that when this is done like this, maybe at frame 30, I want it to gently start moving. From frame 30, let's go to frame, maybe this frame 40. Yeah, from frame 40, I want it to start moving gently to this left side. So I'm going to click on the same transform. For the X value, I'm going to keyframe this part, and I'm going to move it forward to maybe like frame 2. Let's go to like frame 250, and let's move it to the side like this. So I'm just gauging it by eye. I might have to change it eventually. Let's just say 1.25. Okay, let's move it back just a wee bit more, maybe minus 1.3. Okay, now instead of gauging it by eye, I can just go in here. I'm going to bring in the text plus node, connect that to the renderer 3D to create a merge node. And for this text plus node, I'm going to type in caps lock resolve. I'm going to pick this font called Null Shock. And let's set this to 0.125. Let's drag this to the viewer. I want this null shock to be like so. So I need to move this back a bit more. So I'm just going to go back to this transform here and move this back just a wee bit more. Maybe not so much like so. This looks okay. Yeah, I think it's equally positioned, I think. Let's say I move this text forward just a little bit like so. Okay, so we have that going there. We may still need to make further adjustments later on, but I just want to use this text to see where to position that box there. Now you see it's kind of plain, so we need to add some lights to the merge node. So I'm going to click on an empty part of the node grid there, shift space bar, bring in directional light. This. And click add. Connect this directional light to the merge 3D here. Now for the renderer 3D, I'll just enable lights, no shadows. Shadows tend to mess up the box I created. I don't know why. Let's go to directional light, go to transform. Now for the X value, I type 30, Y value, I type 30, Z value, I type minus 30. I got these settings off of Noah Upsdale's videos. The man makes such nice Resolve tutorials. He hasn't made any recently, but he's really badass. Thanks, Noah. I appreciate you, sir. Now we go to this. Now, if you now play this back, we see it just comes like so. and it moves back. Now for these animations I set up in this transform, I need to add some smoothness to it. So I open the spline editor, zoom to fit. I click on this to select all the keyframes. I press F on the keyboard to flatten the keyframes, make them smoother. Then for the easing, I'll just drag this in like so till it's like almost 70. Close the spline editor. One other thing we need to do is I don't want the text to be showing at this beginning. So what I'm going to do is right here is when I want the text to start moving in. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring in a rectangle mask node. I'm going to make the width to be 1.5. I'm going to make the height to be 1. I'm going to make the soft edge 0.1. So if I drag this to the left viewer, you see we have this. Connect that to the mask input of this merge. I want a situation where at this frame here is around 40. So let's make it rounded. Let's make it frame 40. I'll now go to this rectangle mask. I'm going to drag it off the screen like so. Increase the value till it's completely off the screen. Something like this. Keyframe this. Then I'll move to where this thing settles finally, where it stops. So how do I know where it stops? I just click on this transform. You see the mark here, so it's around frame 250. So I just click frame 250, go back to this rectangle mask, and now drag this rectangle mask to completely fill the screen. Like so. It doesn't need to fill the screen completely. If you see the outline here, you just need to show the text. So I'm just like so. That looks okay. Let's just say 0.95. Just like figures rounded. Now we have this setup, but I need to now go here and go to spline editor, zoom to fit, click on the select of the keyframes, press F on the keyboard to flatten it. Let's say I increase easing like so. Let's just leave it at this for now. You will now see why we need to now make some adjustments to this curve. So if I go to the beginning here, I keep pressing the arrow on the keyboard to see the movements. Now I want this to have happened to start revealing. So I'm just going to drag the edge of this handle here. So I want it to have started showing by now. Something like so. So if I now go here, it follows that. So maybe as much as I want it to be showing, I don't want it to move too fast. So I just move like so. Now it's now overlapping too fast. So I'm just going to move this back a little bit and drag this down a little bit. Maybe move this back down just a little bit too. So it just keeps going like so, like so, like so. Then it's a little too fast there. Just going to drag this down just a little bit more. So just doing this push and pull, like so. There it keeps moving. Then yeah, that's cool. So if you go back, beautiful, beautiful. Now we can close spline editor. For this text, I just want to add a little jazz to it. Let's go to shading. Under shading, click gradient. Set the color of this gradient here. Click on this. Let's pick this bright one. Click that. And for the white one, click on there. Click on this. Pick the darker shade. This is the darker shade, I think. Cool. We pick that. Then we go to scroll down a little bit, go to mapping angle, mapping level, change it to full text. Then the mapping angle, change it to maybe 30, maybe 45. So it looks like the light is from under. Then if you've looked at one of my tutorials, I'll put a link below where you can download the free tool called Bevel. I want to bring that tool in between here now. So I'll go to Effects, under Edit, and go to under Effects, go to DT. I have this MR Bevel. I'll drag that in here until it changes color. and drop that in here, close effects tab. And now we have this thing here. I go to the effects. I don't want the width to be so much. Let's say I drop it to 0.1. So it just has that subtle light lit up effect. And then I don't want the brightness to be so much. Let's say I drop it to 0.5. Maybe even 0.1. 0.1 is too small. Let's say 0.2. So it's just there at the edge. This looks good. Now we go to this. Let's pull this up a little bit. And I want to now have an effect where, if you see here, I want the text to, let's say at frame 60, I want to put a transform here, shift spacebar, bring in the transform node. So at frame 60, I want this text to be slightly bigger. So I'm going to keyframe this, and I want it to not be at the center exactly, to not be at this location. So I'm just going to move it forward maybe by 0.6. Then I want the size to be maybe like 1.2. I think it's too much. 1.1. It's just something subtle. Then I'll move to maybe like frame 320. Then drop this back to 1. Just something subtle. Then drop this back to 0.5. And for this transform, I'll just go to spline editor, click on zoom to fit, select all the keyframes, press F on the keyboard, increase the ease in to maybe like something close to 75, close spline editor. Now also one other thing I want to do is I want to go to this text. I want to let it track a little bit. When I say track, I want to increase the character spacing, this thing here. I want that to gently come together at the end. So I'm going to go to that frame 60 where I started the other animation there. Click on tracking. And I want this tracking to be maybe like 1.1. Then I want to go to 320 where that whole thing stopped and drop this back to 1. I go to text, I go to spline editor, zoom to fit, select all the keyframes, press F on the keyboard, and then increase ease into almost 70, something like this. Nothing too super accurate. Now, but the only problem I have is this whole tracking thing for the text is happening to the center. I want it to happen to the left. So I'm going to click on this text. Click on the left aligned vertical horizontal anchor here. But that now positions the text at the wrong location. I just click on this arrow, I drag it back to where it was, get back a bit more. Okay, so now if we go back here, we see we can just add a little jazz to it. Let's bring in shift spacebar, bring in a soft glow node. For the soft glow node, it's too much. Let's just increase the glow size to 100 and drop the blend to 0.2. So it's just something subtle. And we can give this whole thing now a background. So I'm going to bring in a background node, bring in a merge node, connect this merge to the foreground and connect this to the background. The background to the background, and drag this to the viewer. We see we have a black background. Not exactly the most exciting background. So click on background. Click on the type, pick gradient. A gradient type, pick radial. The start for this X set to 0.5. The Y value to 0. And set the end value of this X to still 0.5. But the Y value to 1. So it has this look. And for the color, just click on this darker one. Click on color, set it to this nice color here, but pick a darker, very dark version of it. Click OK. Then click on the lighter shade. Click on this color. Pick that shade we just picked. Let's make it slightly darker. Something like that. And then we're good to go. Now for this background, so that it doesn't create banding or anything like that, I'm just going to go here, shift spacebar, bring in film grain and add that to it. Now I'm not going to make any changes to the film grain. I know it's a little much. If I zoom in, you see it's kind of much, but When you export it, doesn't look so bad. You can make adjustments subsequently, but this removes the banding in there. And I think we're almost done. The only thing is I want a situation where towards the end, I want this box to now open up and reveal the Davinci Resolve logo, that thing we painstakingly created here. So what I'm going to do is connect, now move this whole thing here down to this merge, and now connect this logo to this merge. It's too big. So I'm just going to go to this transform, this first transform here. Let's scale it down a whole lot. So what we're going to do, let's just bring this merge 3D here so we see where it sits in space. Before we do the scaling thing, let's double click back. Let's just move this thing back. I want it to be inside that box. Let's hold down Control to zoom in and put this guy right inside that box. Small that. Okay. And let me just rotate it a bit. Then I just move it back. So it's sitting right in the center of the box, but it's still too big. So that's where I now go to scale, reduce the scale of this stuff so it sits in the box. But I want this to be rotating. I want this logo to be rotating. Let's say I drag that to this viewer. I want it to be rotating. Let me zoom in a bit so we get to see it. Come on, where are you? Okay. So I want it to be rotating. So what I will do is go to the X value. Let's see the Y value actually. Go in here and type equal to time. It's capital, wrong. Small case time. So it keeps rotating. But I also want it to rotate along the X and Z axis. So for the X, I can just type equal to time divided by 5. And go to the Z one. I'm just going to type equal to time divided by, let's say 3. So it just makes it look a little interesting. The animation looks interesting, something like that. Okay. Then we move to, but I want all this. Let's just put minus in front of them because I want it to rotate along with that box. Like so. So now it's inside the box. We can drag this to the right viewer. You see it doesn't show. But now I want this box to unfurl. So where I want the box to unfurl from, I want it to start from frame 260. So we go to frame 260 and I go to the box. So this is the box here, right? This is what I use to close the box. This is duplicate 3. That's the one that folds all the 4 boxes. So I'm just going to go here. Go to this rotation here, click on it, go to frame 320 and set this back to 0. So you see it's expanded already there. Then I want to fold the right and left flaps. So I'm going to go to this transform and set this also to, let's go back to frame 260, keyframe this. Let's go to this one too, keyframe this and go to frame 320. And set this to 0 and go here, set this also to 0. So you see they are all unfurled. But I want to show you by the time they are completely unfurled, it fades off, right? So I'm just going to go to this image plane. I'm going to click keyframe the opacity here. I'm going to go to like frame 3, let's just say frame 320 and 300. I'm going to keyframe this point, then go back to frame 320 and drop the opacity to 0. So it fades off, but you still see this thing here. Why that is showing is because, you know, we had this whole thing merged with it on top. So they are the ones showing there. So to make sure that those don't show, I'm going to go to somewhere before this thing starts fading up. Let's say we go to frame 260 actually, or even earlier when the box has closed, because at this point when the box closes we don't need the images again, this video display, you know, because right now you see it folds from this video display. By the time the box is closed, we don't need these videos anymore. So we can go to frame 100 and go to this image plane here. Go to materials, keyframe opacity, go here, go to materials, keyframe opacity, go here, go to materials, keyframe opacity, move forward by 1 frame and drop opacity to 0 across all 3 image planes. I'm sure you see another problem. The logo is already showing before the box gets there. So what we're going to do to make sure that that does not happen is go to frame 260, go to that logo. So the logo shouldn't display until then. So I'm going to go in there, go to the inside the group, double click on it to open it. I'm going to go to Chrome, click on opacity. I'm going to go to image plane, click on opacity. I'm going to move back 1 frame by pressing the back arrow on the keyboard and drop the opacity to 0. Go to Chrome, drop the opacity to 0 and close this back. And I want a situation where when the box now unfolds, when it unfolds like that, I want a situation where I want this logo to now increase a little bit in size. So from frame 260, I'll go to this transform here. I'll go to here and just keyframe this, and then to frame 320, I'll just increase the size to maybe something like that. Looks like 0.66 is fine, or even 0.7. Okay. Then for this now, I just go to spline editor, select the keyframes, press F on the keyboard, and we can just close the spline editor. So you see nothing is actually showing on the timeline. It's because I didn't connect everything to media out. Let's go back to the Fusion page. Now to find let me zoom out a bit so I can locate media out. There it is there. So just zoom in and connect this back to media out and drag this to the viewer. We have that. So if we go to the page and we have it showing on the page, right click on this, render in place. Let's make it codec H.265. This shows the most banding as far as I've seen whenever you have this kind of faded thing, which is where I added the film grain. Let's say we render in place, specify location, and just render it. And now let's play it back. Let me just put in and out, and let's turn on loop. Just click here, Ctrl F for full screen, and let's play it back. And now we have this beautiful thing going. I know the noise is kind of too much though. The film grain is too much, but there we go. I think the expanding logo is doing way too much. So I'm going to close back here, right click on this, decompose to original. We're going to go back to the Fusion page. Let's just go to that here, this transform here. I don't think I need this transform. It's not doing anything, so I can delete this. Now for this transform, I go to the scale. So I go to spline editor, go to tick scale, zoom to fit. So I don't want this to happen so soon. So what I'm going to do is go here and say, select all the keyframes, right click on it. I'm going to go to ease. I'm going to go to in cubic. So it takes forever, then it finally expands. So that way, when we go here and it starts expanding, it doesn't cut into the box at all. The box just disappears, and then this shows better. So go to here and render in place yet again, enter. But before we go on, before we even render this thing, let me just cancel this. Let's go back to the Fusion comp. There's one other thing I need to do. Close the spline editor. So let me zoom out a bit. So just between this render and this text, I want to bring a drop shadow, just add a little character to it. So I'm just going to go here, select all of this, go down control, let's expand this a bit, click on this renderer 3D, shift spacebar, bring in a drop shadow, enter. Now for the drop shadow, let's just set the distance to 0.075 and the blur to, let's just say 0.8. So 0.85 actually. And I think I'd rather put the drop shadow after the text. So I'm going to expand this, hold down shift, click on the drop shadow and move this here until it changes color. And then, yeah, so everything now has a bit of character to it. Beautiful. So now we can go back to the edit page. I'm satisfied now. Right click on this, render in place, and render, and that's it, guys. I know it's a long one. I just wanted to go through each of the steps, make mistakes right in front of you, and see how I go through this whole process. It's pretty exciting stuff. Yes, it takes a bit of time to set up, but the results make the time worth it. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, as I enjoyed it. See this beautiful stuff. And see you on the next one. Cheers.